bigger, it's better!
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we have 3 different AR10 / DPMS style of uppers to talk about. Now, full disclosure on these upper receivers, these are uppers that I sell through my company, Focus Shooting LLC. These are built, bought, and paid for by me, and I do stand to make a little bit of money off of them. So just know that as I talk about all of the components, performance, and everything, that I might be a little bit personally biased towards them. Now, before we get into the specifics of each build, parts list, assembly, and performance, we're going to go ahead and just tell you what they are first. So the first option, this is what I'm going to call the Battle Rifle Mini. This is a 12.5-inch 308. It is about as short and loud as you could ever really want to go with a 308. Now, next up is a much more reasonable option. This is a 16-inch 308, which is much more of an all-purpose do anything build, much more appropriate barrel length for 308. And of course, last up, we have a lightweight-ish profile barrel. This is a 18-inch 6.5 Creedmoor with the Hansen profile barrel. So it is a factory pinned gas block on there as well. And this is much more of a long-range centric build, though while still not being too long or heavy. 18-inch does give you good velocity, not top-tier velocity with 6.5 Creedmoor, but definitely good enough. And as we'll get into performance later on, definitely was able to get us out to 700 yards and beyond. Now, getting into the specifics of the builds, these are all built on the Aero M5 platform. So all of the upper receivers are the Aero M5. Now, if you don't know, the M5 platform that Aero does is basically a DPMS pattern, so these should be compatible with just about every DPMS lower out there, including budget options from Palmetto State Armory, Bear Creek Arsenal, so on and so forth. Now, all of the lowers that I tested these on were the Aero Precision M5 lowers, as they match up quite well, and they're, of course, from the same product line. Now, the uppers themselves are 7075 T6 aluminum, all good there. You, of course, have your standard forward assist, shell deflector, and dust cover, as well as the uppers are T-marked if you care about that sort of thing. And while overall, they're not necessarily the cheapest uppers on the market, they are quite nice. The machining work is done very well. The anodization, all of that looks very good. The fit between the upper and lower is very, very tight when using Aero M5 lowers. So overall, again, the machining quality, the looks, all of that, they're not too terribly heavy. They're not the lightest uppers on the market either, but overall, they're a very good building block for an AR10 that doesn't cost too much money and is still very compatible with other options on the market. Now, getting into the barrel on the 12.5-inch 308, this is Ballistic Advantage's Performance Series. Or not Performance Series, I believe this is their Modern Series. So this is a 12.5-inch carbine length gas system. Now, getting into that, all of these I wanted to run very, very softly. I didn't want them to be terribly overgassed from the factory. The standard gas port that these come with is a .066, which is very small. However, for 308, that is what I would consider to be a little bit overgassed. Now, all of the 308 uppers that we sell come with a break arms pinned adjustable gas block. So the barrels themselves are dimpled by me, and the adjustable gas blocks are thrown on and then pinned. And they are all tuned to eject brass at about 330, which is about as low as you want to go. Now, as you guys have probably already seen quite a bit of at this point, these are very soft shooting upper receivers for 308. Now, once I set the gas blocks into the position, I basically forgot about them, and they've worked very well. Again, ejecting brass and steel case anywhere between 315 to about 4 o'clock on the low end. Now, while these are, again, soft shooting for 308, that does not mean that they are low recoil. These are, of course, still 308, still have a good amount of recoil. They're very fun to shoot, but they also, of course, do still have that recoil. Now, 12.5-inch 308, this is going to be a little bit unsensible. 308 isn't necessarily velocity dependent like 5.56. However, with a 12.5-inch barrel, you're still sacrificing a couple hundred feet per second over just a 16-inch barrel. And of course, longer barrels, you will get additional velocity as well. However, these are still very effective in a very small and light package for a 308. This is about as small and light as you can get a 308 and still be relatively effective. In fact, the accuracy that we were able to get out of this platform, which we'll talk about later on, and the distance capabilities, we were able to take this out to 600 yards without much issue with crappy ammunition. Now, it's not to say that this is an ideal platform or that this is ideal for really any application. However, if you want maximum firepower, minimum length, minimum size, weight, all that sort of stuff, you want that 308 caliber, 12.5 inches of 308 is the shortest I would go, like 10.3 for 5.56. 12.5 inches is the shortest I would go for 308. Though again, this is not a general purpose. This is very niche. This is really not necessarily a practical gun in any way, shape, or form. This is if you have a very specific application where you want a lot of firepower in the shortest possible package, like maybe a suppressed hog gun or something like that. In that sort of role, it could make a slight modicum of sense. But again, these are not what I would consider to be general purpose uppers. Now, getting into the handguard on the Battle Rifle Mini, this is the Aero Precision M5 Atlas R1. Now, the R1 rails have the full-length Picatinny rail on top. I'm a big fan of full-length Picatinny unless you're trying to shave size and weight, which we'll get onto on the other upper receivers that we talk about. Now, the Aero Precision handguards are nice in some ways. They are fairly lightweight. They're fairly well thought out. You, of course, have M-LOK at the 3, 6, and 9 full-length pick rail. You have a fairly decent taper lock mount up on top of the fact that the barrel nut, which is a steel barrel nut, has to be timed for the gas tube. I'm not a big fan of that in terms of assembly, but in terms of durability, it is a little bit better to have it that way. Overall, while these aren't the strongest handguards on the market, they do have all of the features that you want. M-LOK, full pick rail, QD sections at the back. And again, they're fairly lightweight and they're not too terribly expensive. Now, specifically talking about the barrel to handguard fit, because this is of course a 12.7-inch rail, 12.5-inch barrel. The barrel is recessed into the upper receiver, which means that the handguard does protrude past the threads of the barrel just a little bit. Now, with the A2 flash hider on here, you can see that the tines do not start until they clear the front of the handguard, so there's no chance of accidentally damaging your handguard. If you wanted to throw on a very aggressive muzzle brake that has the port start very, very low on it, you could, in theory, damage the handguard. Now, when we talk about suppressor use, fortunately, the ID of the handguard at the end, it's sort of beveled here at the end, is just over 1.5 inches, which means, in theory, it will be able to fit most suppressors on the market, provided that they're not the biggest, fattest suppressors that you can possibly find. This one here will probably end up being suppressed with a YHM Resonator K, I want to say. With their QD flash hiders, it pushes it up just perfectly far enough to where you are actually able to mount the suppressor and have it just sit just barely inside the end of the handguard. Now, I can't say that every suppressor on the market will do that. However, again, most will, as long as they're not the thicker 1.6, 1.75 inch diameter version. Now, as far as muzzle devices go, the A2 flash hider is standard, as it is perfectly acceptable for just about every application out there. I did actually have a 3-prong flash hider on this specific upper that totally destroyed itself, but 12.5-inch 308 is not particularly forgiving, and so it did bend one of the prongs completely out. Now, moving back from there, the second part of the heart and soul of this upper receiver and all of the upper receivers that we have are Toolcraft nickel boron BCGs. Now, these are a fairly expensive component for the build, but they are exceptionally nice. AR10s, DPMS patterns, whatever you want to call them, LR308s, they tend to be a little bit more finicky. A lot of that has to do with the gassing. We have solved that with the adjustable gas block and the fact that they tend to gum up fairly quickly. Most of the AR10s that I've had and owned over the years had a slightly more aggressive cleaning schedule to make sure that they were able to run reliably. In this case, through 3 different uppers, well actually 2 308 uppers. I have about 1,000 rounds through mostly crappy steel cased ammunition, and then I have about 200 rounds through the 6.5 Creedmoor upper. None of them have been cleaned or lubricated since initial assembly, and from first to last round they've been running flawless. The ejection, extraction, identical every time, save for when we got the upper receivers very hot. When we got them very, very hot, we would tend to get a little bit erratic ejection sometimes, but that is just going to happen when you get a 12.5-inch 308 very hot. Now, the bolt carriers themselves, this is a 8620 carrier. This is a 9310 bolt with the enhanced extractor. So the enhanced extractor basically just has a stronger spring and insert on top of the Vuitton O-ring as well, meaning that it has very, very good extraction force. We fed a lot of steel case. We did not clean or lubricate whatsoever. And again, it did not skip a beat. Now, lastly, on the upper receiver, we have a Aero Precision 7075 mil-spec style charging handle. Nothing special there, though, again, if you did want something nicer, we could, of course, add that on for you. Now, that about does it for the parts list on the 12.5-inch Battle Rifle Mini. Perhaps getting into something a little bit more sensible, this is, of course, the 16-inch version. Now, in the back end, basically everything is the same. You have a M5 Aero Precision upper, standard charging handle, Toolcraft nickel boron BCG. Moving forward from there, what we have is the 15-inch Atlas M5 S1 handguard. So the S1 handguard has the Picatinny on top, nicely removed. This is a very thin, a very aesthetic-looking handguard that is slim, lightweight, still retains all the same features. You still have the QD, M-Lock 3, 6, and 9. However, it is considerably lighter, trimmer, if that's a big deal to you. And it's going to be a big deal because these upper receivers are heavier. Now, on top of that, the barrel on here, this is the 16-inch Ballistic Advantage Modern Series mid-length. Now, same pinned adjustable gas block from Breek Arms. So the barrel is again dimpled, pinned adjustable gas block, set to eject brass and steel case ammunition, and you are between 315 and 4 o'clock, depending on what ammunition you go with. Now, the reason for the slightly lighter handguard is that we do, of course, have a longer, heavier barrel. Now, the profile that Ballistic Advantage is using on these is what they call their tack to government. It's really just a middleweight profile. So you have a .750 taper basically in the back and a .750 in the front with a couple little step downs. Overall, the barrel profile is what I would consider to be very good, and the accuracy and performance that we were able to get out of it at distance were again very nice. Overall, a very similar setup to our 12.5, just with a more reasonable barrel length and a lighter and longer handguard. Now, the last option that we need to talk about, this is the 18-inch 6.5 Creed. Now, a couple departures in this one. Again, the back end is all the same. The barrel on this one is the 18-inch Hansen barrel from Ballistic Advantage. So this is an 18-inch mid-length gas system. The gas port on here is so small that my pin gauge set did not go low enough. The smallest pin gauge that I have is a .060, and this is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like .055, .057. From the factory, this is not an adjustable gas block. From the factory, it ejects brass case Aguila 140 at about 3:30 to 4 o'clock, and then the 140 grain match from Hornady about the same as well. From the factory, these are gassed incredibly well, and there is no need for an adjustable gas block, on top of the fact that these are pinned from the factory. Now, the factory roll pin that they include is just a spiral roll pin. I went ahead and threw in a solid roll pin that has a little bit tighter of a fit, a little oversized, so that that gas block never moves on you. Now, the Hansen profile is again kind of a middleweight profile. If you look at it by itself, it looks kind of thin. However, you have to keep in mind that the gas block journal is .875, not .750. So you have a very simple straight taper with a little step up to the tiniest of shoulders here for your .8750 gas block. And then you have again a continuous taper towards the end. The end is probably .750 because there's just a little step down after the gas block. So overall, it is not a heavy profile. However, it is definitely not a lightweight profile. Again, if you look at it by itself, it looks a little thinner, but then you compare it next to something else and it's definitely a little thicker. However, it does keep a lot of that weight in the back, and it is very well balanced. Now, the handguard on here, this is again, the Atlas M5 S1 handguards. This is the 15-inch version. So you have a very slim tram handguard that's not too heavy, still gives you all of the length that you need. If you're interested, this is a UTG M-Lock bipod that is very, very stable. It's not too heavy either. I think it comes in at like 12 ounces with the M-Lock attachments. However, there is basically no adjustability in it whatsoever. But again, when you're shooting at long range, it was very, very stable. Now, getting into performance and accuracy, since I have this one sitting here. Now, as you see it, this this entire rifle is about 10 pounds, which would be heavy for an 18-inch 5.56 gun. However, we are talking about a much larger, heavier 6.5 Creedmoor, which is going to be much more capable at distance, much better wind performance, drop performance, all that sort of fun stuff with a 4-16 on top, back when Nikon actually made scopes. Now, getting into the performance and shooting dynamics of the 18-inch 6.5 Creed with the Hansen barrel, this is actually my first gas gun in 6.5 Creed, and I can tell you that this is a night and day difference between this and both of the 308 versions. Even though the 308 versions have adjustable gas blocks, this is a incredibly soft, incredibly smooth shooting gun. When we were going out to 700 yards, which we took this out to 700 yards with just cheap, crappy Aguila ammunition, the recoil impulse is very soft, even with just an A2 flash hider on the front end. Even at 700 yards, it was very easy to spot my hits and, more importantly, my misses and make adjustments and corrections off of that. So with this 18-inch Hansen barrel, with the proper gas port size, that very, very small microscopic size gas port size, this is a very, very good shooter. Perfect hit. Again, a much softer, smoother recoil impulse, even than the 308s with adjustable gas blocks. Now, a lot of that has to do with the 6.5 Creedmoor caliber in general. Now, if I didn't mention it earlier, these are the black nitride barrels. However, these are 416R stainless steel because this is, of course, a Hansen Performance Series barrel. So, getting into the accuracy now on the barrel, unfortunately, I only had 2 loads to test. I had the bulk ammunition that I was going to be shooting, which was 140 grain Aguila, which I was able to get for like $1 a round, which for 6.5 Creedmoor is very cheap. And then I had some Hornady ELD-X 143 grain, which I was going to use as kind of the match load to see how accuracy was. Now, with the Aguila 140 grain, which is just kind of crappy ball ammunition, I was able to get about 1.5 to 2 MOA, which for me is perfectly fine for a non-match ball round. And with the 143 grain ELD-X, I was able to put 5 rounds in the same hole. So I am very confident in saying that the 6.5 Creedmoor uppers with match ammunition and a good shooter behind them are certainly capable of MOA groups or sub-MOA groups in the right conditions. So the performance, the shootability, the accuracy that I was able to get out of it was excellent, and honestly, I can't ask for more. Now, getting into the 16-inch 308 upper, this is still what I would consider to be the most practical upper for most people in most situations. You're not going to get the long-range performance that you're going to get out of the 18-inch 6.5 Creed. You're probably not going to get the same accuracy either, depending on what loads you're using, of course, due to the 416 versus 4150, and of course the Hansen versus the standard sort of middleweight profile here. Now, the reason why this is still probably the most practical for the most people is that it's chambered in the 308, and you can get cheap, crappy steel-cased ammunition for 50 cents and under. Now, I was actually very fortunate when testing these 308 uppers, as I had 1,000 rounds of pre-Rona pricing 308 Wolf Military Classic laying around. Now, when we get into the accuracy testing of the 16-inch 308, we were able to test a handful of different loads. So I had some 145 grain, just the Wolf Military Classic, which actually shot at about 1.5 MOA pretty consistently, which I was actually very happy with. So that was actually the ammunition choice that we decided to go out to 600 and 700 yards with, because I had the most of it lying around. Now, on top of that, we tried some M80 Ball, and the accuracy was horrendous. It was Magtech M80 Ball, which is basically garbage ammo. I probably will never buy it again. It shot anywhere from 6 to 12 MOA, depending on the specific group that I was trying to get out of it. So overall, the performance of the Magtech M80 Ball was, again, atrocious. Then we also tried some 168 grain AMAX, as well as some 168 grain just Hornady black. Both of those coming in at somewhere between 1 and 2 MOA, nothing super special. And then the last group that we managed to test, because I actually found 10 rounds of Federal Gold Medal Match 168 grain CR match king loads, and we were able to get a 5-round group at about an inch. So again, I'm very happy with. However, it also performed exceptionally well in the 12.5-inch upper as well, with 4 rounds landing in the same hole and then having 1 flyer. Now, overall, the accuracy on the 12.5-inch version was very similar. The Wolf Military Classic grouped very well, about 1.5 inches or so. The Magtech M0 Ball did horrible, and both of the 168 grain Hornady loads grouped just fine, somewhere between 1 and 2 MOA. Now, again, this upper, even though this is a 12.5-inch upper, we were experiencing out to 600 yards. I believe the drop with the 145 grain Wolf Military Classic was 18 MOA, which is quite substantial, versus about 14 to 15 MOA on the 16-inch 308 with the same ammunition. So we were getting more drop with the 12.5-inch. However, the main problem there was actually the wind. So the wind on the 12.5-inch was moving around anywhere from 1 to 2 feet at 600 yards. Some of that could have been me as well, but I was getting less wind drift with, of course, the higher velocity on the 16-inch version versus the 12.5-inch. So while getting a 12.5-inch 308 out to 600 and even 700 yards is definitely doable, we were just doing it with crappy Wolf Military surplus ammunition, but it is definitely doable. Though again, not ideal. The 16-inch 308 version overall was much more consistent. It had less drop, it had less wind movement at 600 yards, even again with just that crappy 145 grain Wolf ammunition. Even so, the 16-inch version is something that I would be definitely comfortable out to 600 yards with crappy ammunition. And then if I wanted to take it out further, 7, 8, 9, even 1,000 yards, I would like to get, 100 rounds of match ammunition, something that I really like, so I could really just tune and get a good dope for a specific type of ammunition that actually has good long range characteristics. As it were, both of the 308 uppers are very soft shooting for 308 uppers, and it does have to have that caveat in there. Even with the adjustable gas blocks tuned as low down as I consider comfortable, you're still exhibiting 308 recoil. It's never going to feel like a 5.56 7.62x39 gun. Though, of course, the flip side of that is that you get the higher 308 firepower, whether that be for hunting, bipedal, or not. And of course, you get that better long-range characteristics than 5.56 or way better than 7.62x39. And of course, even now, there is still a wide variety of less expensive 308 ammo. Even though it's not cheap, it's still going to be less expensive and more available than what you're going to be able to find for 6.5creed, unless, of course, you're doing your own hand loads. So overall, that about does it for all of the uppers, the parts list, all of that sort of stuff. Going over the assembly process, everything is the same as all of my basic upper receivers. So you have a lapped upper receiver, you have a bedded barrel to the action, you have the barrel nut, which is mounted with 50 foot-pounds, which is what I do on all of my upper receivers. All of the gas blocks are, of course, pinned in place. Now, the 12.5-inch and 16-inch 308 versions have, of course, the adjustable gas block pre-installed. The set screws themselves are set to 30 inch-pounds, and they are set with Permatex 272, which is, again, a high-temperature thread locker. So with all of that out of the way, guys, that is about it for the video. Let me know what you guys think of these uppers in the comments down below. If there's a different barrel length, handguard combo that you would like to see, let me know as well. And with all of that out of the way, guys, I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace out. perfect hit. Excellent.